Hello, good morning to all the participants to our second webinar on from local to European barriers and solutions to tackle energy poverty. Yesterday we had our first webinar with the local initiatives, and today we will have a look at the European projects which are tackling energy poverty. Before we start, I would like to give you some technical information about the webinar. First of all, I would like to present myself. I am Marina Varvesi, the coordinator of the EASME project. The webinar will last from now until 12. There will be the presentations of the various speakers. You will be able to see the speaker on your video and to see also their slides. All the participants have the microphone and the camera off. You will be able to pose your questions and interact through the two communication channels of Zoom. On one side, you have the chat box, which has been activated for interactions. The chat will be moderated by Florence Casa from EAPN. And on the other side, you have the Q&A box where you can pose questions. The Q&A box will be moderated by Virginia Mata from EcoSpace and obviously our moderator, Stefan Bouzarovski. Just some more technical issues. The webinar is being recorded. You will receive at the end of the 3 days the link for the recording of the webinars, and there is also the layout, an infographic layout, which is being carried out for the 3 days. The link is the same as yesterday's webinar, and it will be the same also for tomorrow. So we hope to see you again also tomorrow. We are now heading for 100 participants. Yesterday we had more than 140 participants connected to the webinar, and I am very happy to welcome all of you to the second webinar of our 3 days cycle of webinars. So, having given all the technical information of the webinar, I am very pleased and honored to welcome Vincent Berrutto from the head of unit of the EASME to open the webinar, and thank you, Vincent, for participating and joining us.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marina. Warm welcome to you all. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar today. My unit, as Marina said, is managing the energy efficiency projects under the Horizon 2020 program, which is the program for research and innovation. And you may wonder what's the link between research and innovation and the subject of today, which calls for immediate action. And the answer is very simple. In the field of energy efficiency under Horizon 2020, most of our projects have tried to improve market conditions. So they've really worked on the market, trying to foster the implementation of energy policies, trying to engage and empower consumers. And we've done that through different means, and we've targeted all the relevant market actors, including, of course, those who cannot afford their home to heat their home properly. And this is a high share of the population, around 8%. This is an area where we know that energy efficiency and renewable energies can help overcome some of the problems. So we had in total, since we started in 2014, supported 19 projects in this area. They're very diverse, but they usually have a budget of around 2 million euro. They engage participants from 6-7 countries. We usually have consortium of 10-11 partners. They are what we call coordination and support action, which means that they are supported at 100%. And the idea is to replicate best practices from one country to the others. And these projects have tested different approaches. We have had projects developing low-cost measures for energy poor households. And this is the case, for instance, of the ASSIST project, which is organizing this webinar. Another example is the STEP project, which you will hear about later on. We had projects looking at deeper actions, looking at the renovation of buildings, how to increase performance of buildings, but also reduce the duration of renovation work, and also looking at ways to support the financing of this renovation. Of course, a very interesting and very important subject when we talk about renovation in this part of the population. We've tested, for instance, the use of energy performance contracts, whereby the initial investment is being covered by a third party in exchange of part of the savings afterwards. We've also looked at the supply side, energy supply side, and I think in this webinar you will hear a very interesting presentation from the European Federation of Renewable Energy Cooperatives, and you will see that the energy suppliers can also play a big role to alleviate energy poverty. And finally, more recently, we also had projects engaging energy poor households in joint initiatives. So as you can see, there's a lot of different projects addressing this issue. My colleague Silvia Vivarelli will give you some more details in her presentation. And if after listening to Silvia or after listening to the project's presentation, you are interested in benefiting from our program, then I'd like to inform you that we've got a call which is open now and which will close on the 10th of September. That's our last call for proposals. So it's the last opportunity under the Horizon 2020 program to get support for your projects. And we have a topic dedicated to energy poverty. So please have a look, and I'm sure Silvia will give you the reference of that call. Of course, funding will continue after 2020. We are currently preparing the new funding priorities for the period between 2021 and 2027. What is clear is that these type of activities that empower consumers, including the most vulnerable ones, will continue under the LIFE program for environment and climate, where we have foreseen a specific sub-program for the clean energy transition. And at the moment, we're preparing that sub-program, and I'm sure that the discussions of today, the presentations of this webinar, will inform the preparation of that clean energy transition sub-program. I'm sure that there will be a lot of input that we can get from you. So please contribute. Energy poverty is a very important subject. It's a subject we've paid attention to in our program. There's a lot that can be learned from the projects we've supported in this area. And this is why I wish you a very interesting webinar. Thank you.
Vincent, thank you very, very much. Indeed, we are all connected to the coming call, and it will be a challenge for all of us. Hope to bring up the work on energy poverty. Thank you very much for your presentation, for your brief opening, and more than welcome to stay with us for the webinar and to join us tomorrow. Now I would like to introduce the chairman of our session. I'm sure you most of you, all of you know him, Stefan Bouzarovski. He's the chairman also of the European Energy Poverty Observatory, and he will be chairing the second webinar. And the panelists are, as Vincent mentioned, Silvia Vivarelli from the EASME, and then we have the projects from Stefan, Cezara, and Daan from the REScoop, and Clotilde for the FEANTSA project. So, Stefan, are you
Hello.
with us?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Nice to see you. Thank you for
Likewise.
joining us.
Hello. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this session, and thank you to the organizers for inviting us all and for inviting me to moderate this fascinating session. We will be talking about the various EU projects that have been active in the field of energy poverty. We will get insights from a number of panelists, which I will shortly introduce one by one. Once the panelists have presented, please have questions, think of questions, and ask them through the channels that were previously suggested. We will collect the questions and we will have an online discussion. Please think actively about what you might want to ask them. Indeed, the idea is to encourage participation as much as possible. One thing I should say is, in addition to the EU Energy Poverty Observatory, I myself am involved in one of these projects, which is the Step In project, which is about living lab in energy poverty. So, in a sense, we can bring in multiple insights into this session. So, without wanting to further take any space, I will introduce our first speaker, Silvia Vivarelli. She's a senior project advisor in the energy unit at the Executive Agency for Small and Medium Energy Enterprises, i.e. EASME, which we already heard from, in the European Commission, and she manages a number of projects in consumer engagement on sustainable energy and energy poverty. She holds a master's degree in chemical engineering with a specialization in environmental engineering with more than 20 years experience in the area of sustainable energy. Silvia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Can you hear me? Can you? Yes. So I will try to share my screen so that you can see my presentation. Just 1 second. Yes. Can you see the presentation? Can you? Yes, good. Okay, so, okay, I hope it works. Okay, so thank you very much for the nice introduction. So I don't need to present myself. Maybe just a word for the ones who don't know what EASME, so the Executive Agency for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, is an executive agency set up by the Commission to manage some programs on the Commission behalf. And as Vincent mentioned before, we are in particular managing the energy efficiency course under Horizon 2020. As you know, as you already heard from Vincent, some of the projects, including Assist the Organizer, have been funded through our part of the Horizon 2020 program. And what I would like to do today is to show you some other examples of projects that we have been supporting, somehow trying to alleviate energy poverty, and at the same time also give you indication for the next call, as also mentioned by Vincent before. So is that address energy poverty in different ways, and I will show example of let's say a number of those. But before going to that, maybe I will just quickly tell you what are the let's say the future funding opportunity, let's say the last call that we have under Horizon 2020 this year. Here you see, in this slide, you see just for your reference, a number of topics that could be somehow interesting in case you are trying or wanting to submit a proposal to somehow alleviate energy poverty. But the one that is much more specifically looking at energy poverty is topic mitigating household energy poverty, C2. And the call for somehow for all the topics mentioned in the slide before has just opened, I mean, just now a few months ago, and the deadline is the 10th of September. So you would be still in time in case you would like to prepare a proposal. Yes, so if you have a project idea that you think would somehow meet the requirements of the call, I think that this is also somehow the last call of the Horizon 2020 program. So we invite you to somehow, let's say, think about submitting a proposal if you have, of course, something that would meet what requested, will address what requested under our call, specific call. Then, as Vincent mentioned, under LIFE, we expect, of course, to still address energy poverty as is becoming more and more relevant, as you all know, unfortunately. So in this slide, you will see just let's say, just to give you an overview of somehow the acronym, the names of the projects we have been specifically supporting on energy poverty. And most of them, let's say the vast majority of those projects have been somehow trying to support energy poverty through low-cost energy efficiency measure provided to low-income households. And the typical somehow common way of doing that has been quite similar to what also this ASSIST project has been doing, somehow to train some people, in many cases social workers, in some other cases they were unemployed people, in some other cases they were like people living in the neighborhood. So you train them, then they are somehow ready to go and provide advice, in most cases through household visits to energy poor households, and then trying to somehow to provide, let's say, advice on kind of behavioral changes, but not only, sometimes also low-cost measures like kits, energy-saving kits, and so on. So, and those projects I've tried to summarize here. Some were from the Intelligent Energy Europe program, so the predecessor of what we had afterward in Horizon 2020. And I just would like to highlight one, the REACH project, because in that they were also trying to somehow to bring at let's say at the national level the recognition of energy, let's say energy poverty, as something that needs to be addressed. And they managed to have, especially in Slovenia, this resulted in a kind of nationwide scheme that was triggered by the project, with advice to energy poor people with specific visits all over the countries, visits to households. And then we have, of course, under Horizon 2020, projects like ASSIST, but also the predecessor of ASSIST, which was a Smart Tap project, in which, in this case, smart meters, the peculiarity was that smart meters were somehow used to, let's say, help monitoring the energy consumption of energy poor households, and they could somehow, and that could, of course, help if there was a proper rollout of smart meters, which also, as a result of the project, showed to be not really the case in all countries. And then you have projects that address, let's say, specific, specific kind of vulnerable consumers or potentially energy poor consumers, like the students, because of course they don't get yet a salary, and sometimes they move to the private rented sector, and that could entail energy poverty situations. So that project that is going to finish quite soon really did a great campaign involving engaging consumer in engaging students in energy savings. Change and low-cost measures, like going more into the, let's say, doing more structural changes to the buildings, so making them more energy efficient, like the EnerShift project, which also has just ended. And in that one, somehow recognizing that, of course, energy poor people do not usually have the means to invest in energy efficiency measure or renewable energy measure, then somehow someone else has to bear the upfront cost. And in that case, it was the ESCO, so the energy service companies, that somehow through energy performance contract in a region in Italy, in Liguria, they somehow are kind of doing some refurbishment of social housing. And this project, the figures that you see in the slides, I couldn't manage to update the slides with the very final figures, but those in the slide could be quite close to the final one. So, and so you can see that the investment that are expected to be triggered by the project are quite significant, as well as the energy savings expected. And also in this case, this is always a nice complement in projects that are trying to address more structural changes. Sometimes there is a need to change the local, regional regulations. And in that case, for example, energy performance contract in social housing was difficult to be implemented. And in this case, they managed to modify the regional law to facilitate the implementation, as well as, of course, they went to an agreement with the banking system to facilitate the credit access to energy service company, which is also another issue. I also wanted to show you this project, although it has finished, I think already more than 1 year ago, because I think whenever you would like also to sell to, let's say, to the public, local, national public authorities, why there could be an interest. Part, of course, we would like that the interest would be just to improve the living condition of all people, but unfortunately this sometimes doesn't, is not sufficient to convince policymakers to take a decision. But sometimes monetizing the benefit that could be in there for them in the implementation of energy efficiency measure could be much more, let's say, successful, much more successful. Then we have the result of a project specifically looked into quantifying the multiple benefits of energy efficiency, not only the energy related one, of course, the energy savings of the implementation of energy efficiency measures, but also other benefit. And in particular, in relation to energy poverty, what was really interesting is that they try to quantify at U28 level the number of, let's say, premature excess that could be avoided in case of energy efficiency measure implemented, so that the indoor cold would not be so harmful to the people. So it's between 3,000 and 24,000. Of course, there is a range because this is a kind of modeling exercise, but still it gives you the idea of the amplitude. As well, they were looking at this indoor dampness that occurs as well in case of very cold and humid household. And then they were looking at the asthma problem that could raise because of that. And then they monetized this number and you can see that is quite significant what could be saved if those energy efficiency measures could be implemented, because in relation to the premature mortality, the range is between more than 300,000 euro and 2.1 million euro and 2.5 billion euro, as well as pardon, I think I went too quickly, as well as a similar kind of figure is the monetization of savings that could be linked to a reduced asthma morbidity. So I think this is something that we should keep in mind. I mean, projects should keep in mind when they want to somehow convince policymakers. And then we have in the new project that we have been supporting, that we are now supporting after call 2018, is the Empowerment project that is also somehow looking at health and trying to focus on health and gender impacts of energy poverty. So somehow we start having projects also putting health at the core of the project, which is good and needed, we believe. As well as we have projects that are actually trying to somehow to support kind of policy implementation at a national level, so from EU to national, like social what, and in this case somehow this project is supporting utilities to fulfill the obligation they have on for energy efficiency obligation they have according to Article 7 of the Energy Efficiency Directive, and they have under this directive they have also obligation to somehow have a share. There is a share of measures that has to be implemented as a priority in also energy poor households. And also in social housing, and in that social what will be an interesting, let's say, attempt, and we hope also successful one in trying to set up somehow some schemes that would address both energy efficiency and in this case also renewable energy. And then we have the very last project, just a very, very super quick overview on the last project that we are financing as from the call 2019. Just to give you an example of where projects, in which direction the projects are a bit going. So we have COMACT, and in this case we are moving a bit from just a behavioral change project to making a bit more high impact or high cost, a bit higher cost energy efficiency improvement accessible to energy poor communities in multifamily apartment with the focus buildings in and with the focus in Central and Eastern European countries. And with the power poor, the projects are trying to somehow making possible the participation of energy poor in joint initiatives. So they are exploring different ways of including them in, for example, energy communities, but also through crowdfunding, supporting their participation in joint initiatives. And they will set up a system with the energy supporter mentors who will help exactly on that, as well as they will try to support the inclusion of energy poverty in the local sustainable energy and climate plans. And then MPOR is focusing on the private rented sector, which is also an issue for energy poor people. So will be interesting to see the results also of this project. And the energy measure is a more kind of classical project that we have on low cost measures and behavioral changes. Then if you want to have a look, those are not specifically just focusing on energy poverty, but we have projects, of course, in building for renovation that could be quite relevant as well in the context of energy poverty. And you can see a selection on this publication, and you have the link available in case you would like to look at those. And then just here I summarize, I give you the link of few more projects that I didn't manage to address. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Silvia, for this exceptionally broad, detailed, and helpful overview of all the work that EASME has been doing. So we can now move to our next speaker in the session. And indeed, that's our very own Marina Varvesi. Marina works in ISFOR, which is an Italian knowledge and capacity building company. And for more than 10 years, she has been working to support consumers to manage household energy, but also to find solutions to end energy poverty. And she's, of course, as you all know, coordinates the ASSIST projects. Mainly the project, a lot of the work it does is around household energy advisors, so helping training, networking around these solutions. Previously, she's worked on the H2220 Smarta project. She has a degree in basically in project management, but she's also worked in international, European, and national contexts on various aspects of quality of life. Marina, the floor is yours.
Stefan, thank you very much for the presentation. I will now share my screen, and the idea is to present the ASSIST project, so to explain exactly what we've been doing in the last 3 years, what was the concept of the project and what we actually managed to achieve. And I would like to have also a look at what can come out of ASSIST as a follow-up in the next hopefully months and years. So as Silvia has mentioned, ASSIST is indeed a project funded within the H2020 program. And as Vincent also mentioned, it is a CSA, so we did receive 100% funding. And I must say that without the H2020 funding, the project could not have been achieved, at least not at this wide European level. Let me just spend 1 minute to present all the actors of the ASSIST project who actually enabled the project to come about and to carry out all the activities. We are a consortium of 12 partners coming from 6 countries, and we have a European association. So the team, the Italian team, is made up of, well, ISFOR, the coordinator, then we have RSE and Acquirente Unico. From Spain, we have Ecosurveys and Alginet Distribuzione Energia Elettrica. UK, we have the Seven Wine Energy Agency. Poland, the Federacja Konsumentów and the National Energy Agency of CAPE. Belgium, 2 partners, Fluvius and Vito. And then we have our partner from Finland, Vasa ETT. And as mentioned at the beginning, we have the European Anti-Poverty Network, EAPN. And thanks to the collaboration of all these partners, we actually managed to implement all the project activities. And I am speaking here today, but I'm speaking on behalf of all the partners and to present the results of the ASSIST project. So just to recap and to put ASSIST on a time frame. Silvia already mentioned what's been going on in the last years on energy poverty. ASSIST started in 2017, so it was after some energy poverty projects. but it was not within the energy poverty topic. It was the year before that the topic of ASSIST is consumers engagement. And it started actually before the launch of the European Observatory, with whom we've collaborated for the next years. So let's have a look at what was the underpinning concept of ASSIST. The idea is probably very, very simple. What we noticed is that vulnerable or energy-poor consumers face a lot of different problems related to their energy-poor situation. And for this reason, they have to discuss and to relate to different type of operators, each very competent on their specific sector. What we wanted to create was empowered operators, specifically empowered operators on all aspects of energy poverty. And that's the figure that we defined within ASSIST, that's the Household Energy Advisor. And the added value is that we did not only define the figure, but we also created an association of the HEAs so as to take advantage also of a circular communication within the network. So the idea is that the HEAs, through a training course that was built within the project, were empowered on all the energy poverty topics. The HEAs come from all these different working sectors. So they have a specific background, but then they are empowered on all energy poverty aspects. Now let's have a look at the idea. As mentioned, HEAs, and we've tested it in the 3 years, we've actually trained HEAs coming from these sectors, who have then been able to deliver actions and to support consumers on energy poverty. So once trained, they not only are able to provide advice, but they are also part of a network. That means that they can share amongst themselves the solutions and the experiences and the way they are helping consumers. And coming from different contexts, this circular communication is a great added value, because it was possible that social operators could share with energy operators how to engage and how to dialogue with the vulnerable consumers. And on the other side, energy operators were able to share with the social operators the more technical issues. So the added value of ASSIST is not only the figure of the HEA, but the network itself. What does the HEA does? He has the role of being a direct bridge with consumers. So with a top-down and a bottom-up mechanism, he informs, supports, and directly assists consumers on all their needs of energy poverty. That's a one-to-one. That means that he informs through mail shots and newsletters in a more wide manner, but then the added value of the HEA is that being an operator on the ground, he actually has the direct link with the consumers, and so he is able to directly assist the consumers through what we've called ASSIST actions, which can become services in the future. So what is actually the ASSIST model? Well, we've seen that the ASSIST model can be taken up by actors coming from different working sectors. Here are just an example. We've seen the other examples also in the previous slides. Operators from these actors are trained. We actually built a training course in the 6 languages of the project. It's an online training course, are trained on all the issues related to energy poverty. Once they are trained, that means that once they have successfully finished the training, they access the network, and they are then able, as mentioned, to deliver the action. Here you find some of the indicators that we were meant to achieve during our project, and in most cases we actually positively passed them. I mean, we exceeded them. So what exactly did we do in this 3 years to deliver the ASIS model as just described? Well, the first activity that was carried out at the national and European level was an in-depth analysis on what is energy poverty. Then we defined the profile of the household energy advisor and built the training. We built the network that's also the infrastructure and all the resources of the HEAs, and we supported the HEAs on their on-the-ground activities. That is the delivery of the actions directly and concretely to support energy poor or energy vulnerable consumers. Here are some of the ASIS outcomes that you can all find on our website. If you haven't had the chance to go to our website, the link is www.asistogether.eu, and you can find all the deliverables of the project. These are the indicators. I already mentioned those. So what actually are the results of the ASIS project? The HEA profile, that means the matrix with all the knowledge, competences, and skills that an HEA, i.e. a person who provides support on energy poverty, whatever his background, must have. We have managed to train more than 500 HEAs in all the 6 countries. This means the numbers of people who have actually finished the course, so it is quite a big number. The network of the HEAs that was set up in all the 6 countries. We've built the ICT working environment, the tools and resources, not only to communicate to consumers, but also to monitor the activity. And we've provided the HEAs with professional updating resources. And finally, we've supported the HEAs in the delivery of the actions. That means that thanks to the activities of the HEAs, more than 5,000 consumers were directly assisted by the HEAs. That's the one-to-one action. And through wide communication and awareness building activities, more than 400,000 consumers were reached. Now, we have this model. We actually tested it during the 3 years, and we found out, well, we hoped and we actually managed it, that it is a win-win model for all types of stakeholders. The idea that the model has been built in a holistic manner means that now it is ready to be adapted by all different types of stakeholders. Yesterday, during the first webinar, we had some examples coming from regulators, municipalities, social operators, on how they have been working with ASIS and how the ASIS model can be taken up in the next months and years. Of course, it is positive for the consumer who knows where and how to seek advice for all the energy poverty related problems. And obviously, it helps tackle energy poverty. So just some examples of what we aim and what we hope to see in the future is the take-up of the assist model, for example, by municipalities within their SECAPs. We've had an example of an assist project funded by a foundation. And then we have the idea of creating an independent and non-profit association of HEAs, utilities taking up the model within the CSR policies. Well, we have a lot of ideas for the follow-up of assist, and we are here to share the results and to set the basis also to work with all the stakeholders in the future for the actual follow-up of assist. Well, thank you for your attention, and here are some of our contacts, and of course you can follow the event also on Twitter. We have partners tweeting all of the discussion going on the webinar. Sorry. Okay, that was the presentation of assist, and here I am again. Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you, Marina. We all know about the excellent work of Assist, thanks to your fantastic engagement across the whole energy poverty community. And indeed, it was really good to get an overview of all the excellent work you've done. And indeed, the attendance in this final event testifies to that. We're now going to hear a few more insights from other projects. Next up, we have Cezara Popovici from BEUC, the European Consumer Organization. She works on a variety of energy sustainability and membership coordination projects with a master's in marketing and management of energy. She has also worked in the district heating sector. She coordinates STEP, an H2020 project, which she will discuss today, which also she does together with 9 other BEUC members. Before we go on to Cezara, just a very quick technical note. A rectangle appears on the presentations on the right-hand side of your screen, but please note that the presentations and the whole event will be available for download afterwards, so including the videos. So rest assured, you will be able. There will be nothing missed, even by that rectangle at the end, if there's some material that you want to take note of. Cezara, the floor is yours.
Hi, Stefan, and hi, Marina. I hope you hear me well. Thank you very much for the invitation to this event, and also to Assist Project, who paved the way to STEP. We didn't start from scratch. We had somewhere to learn from. We had someone to look up to. And I think this is a benefit for all European projects, that we can build on each other and not go on this road alone. What is STEP doing with the inspiration starting from Assist? I'll share in a bit, just a moment, so my PowerPoint is on. And share. Hope you can see my screen now. Yes, I have a nodding from Marina that the screen is on. So what is STEP? STEP is Solutions to Tackle Energy Poverty. I think a lot of us like STEPs in this area, because we're also having STEP in, and I've also heard recently of another project called STEPs. We have 9 members, quite well diversified, all consumer organizations. All BEUC members. We are investing in our members and training them on energy poverty, because we know even after this project, they will still be there to advise consumers and carry on the knowledge in this. We started in June, and we're aiming to November 21. But in the meantime, pandemic happens, so we're needing to extend with 6 more months. But for the consumers in energy poverty, will actually be a good thing, because we'll be managing to be there for them for longer. We are tackling energy poverty through advice and low-cost measures, and helping consumers go through behavior change. And also, we're not doing this alone. We're doing this with a network of frontline workers, which is, again, as Assist did and further recommended. It's health workers, it's food banks, it's all the volunteer organizations that are close to consumers and can identify the ones that are in need. To start this, we needed to understand best what's happening in the countries of the project. So we undergone surveys on the ground around last summers to see if there is a definition on energy poverty, if the frontline organization we're working with are understanding this, if they need support, what are the best schemes available, best support schemes there, and how can we help consumers make use of these. As a result of our studies, we've seen that even though it's like at European level, everyone is pretty much in the understanding what energy poverty is and why we need to tackle this together. While at national level, there are still people wondering, is it an energy issue? Is it a social issue? Who is responsible for this? Do they actually have energy poverty at national level? From the study, we've seen that about 77% of the frontline organizations asked were aware, which I think it's already a good start, and 70% of them were offering support, and 89 requested more training on energy poverty, and that is what we are there for them, to connect to them by our members, to offer this specific training. And I think that's very good to see for the future in the European Union, and also for the future of energy poverty, that not only they want to know things, they want to connect to each other. They want to exchange experience. And I think for me, this is the start of making this work best. But of course, doing things and changing what is happening for consumers is not enough. You need to do one step forward and bring the advocacy, so you can change the legislation on national level. So all these changes are afterwards left in the system, they're left in the country. So based on these findings, we'll take our work further on the ground and help to establish the referral networks and build these connections between organizations. We've already shared with them the reports we've done over the summer. And we're also building online and offline training to consumer organizations and the frontline ones. What we've seen now, that online training is actually more needed than ever. So if before we were basing ourselves more on face-to-face due to the current pandemic, it's for sure needed to switch most of our efforts online. And we're seeing how to make that work in the best of case. And we have one of our members, which is also part of ASIST, which is from Poland, Federacja Konsumentów, and they're helping us with this task. Besides offering training, we're not letting consumers just there. We are also following up with them 6 months, 12 months within the project to see, did they manage to access the grants we suggested them to access, or did they have managed to apply for the social support. Because what we've seen in our studies, even though these support mechanisms are in place, either they're not well known or there are always too many barriers to access them. So we're trying to somehow simplify the system and be there for the consumers to access grants. We're also following up on the energy efficiency measures. We're advising them. It's okay to say, like, good, you should turn down your thermostat, or you should change your light bulbs, but I know it's a good idea and you plan to do it, but did you actually do it? And what else would you need in order to be able to do this switch or this change? And again, what we're offering is like policy recommendations, and our members took them mostly with their national authorities. We're seeing in Slovakia, they have, for example, a new government, and they had advocated for energy poverty, and now energy poverty is in their working program, and they're also thinking on making a stakeholder group and a working group for energy poverty. So things are changing on the ground. We see in Lithuania, they put energy poverty and also STEP into the national energy and climate plans. So things are building up, and it's great to see our members being so active in the energy efficiency and the advocacy part. We all know that COVID has taken quite a fair share, a blow on the energy poor consumers. But what is interesting, that I think that the number of consumers that are in this situation has increased. It's not just 10%, it's a lot more. It's a lot more people that have less income, that had to stay more at home, that consumed more energy. So all of a sudden we see the area of the consumers will need to help largely increased. Also, to say some numbers about what we've seen from our members, the price of staying at home our Portuguese member DECO estimated that this was an increasing of €25 per month for electricity and €4 for gas. In the UK, we had a study showing that this is £16 a month in terms of what consumers would need to take out of their pocket. In Italy, for the entire population and country, the effect not only on energy, but for all the other was reaching somewhere to 33 billion. And in Spain, which is about what our BELG member told us, like around 23 billion. So these are big numbers, and every little thing that we can do to save and be there for consumers for the entire network, every little helps in the spirit. And for sure, energy is at the core of what we can do. For future steps and what we are recommending in our paper on policy recommendation is to have a strategy on energy poverty, to always have a dialogue with the local authorities, with the national authorities, to stick together to provide this change and be there for a consumer that is lost, would have someone in the network that they would be able to help them, either through their building manager, that we are also working with the association of buildings, or either with their consumer organization or the health worker, someone that they could get help. We're also advocating for energy efficiency in buildings, and that there's a minimum standard for buildings, so consumers in poor situations would not be pushed into rents of places that they cannot heat properly, or they cannot avoid dampness, which is again for respiratory diseases, for consumers that are affected by other diseases that would be even more prone to, hopefully not the next pandemic, but in case that happens, consumers living in homes that are warm and adequately ventilated are a lot more prone to being able to tackle it. So again, investment not only reducing energy poverty, but also influencing health and keeping consumers' well-being at interest. If you want to know more about us, please subscribe to our newsletters, which is on stepenergy.eu, and there we inform about what our members are doing in all the 9 countries. Thank you so much for your attention, and I remain in touch, and I look forward to hear from the other panelists.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Cezara. It was extremely useful to get a sense of what STEP does, and particularly its efforts to engage national authorities and also a range of other stakeholders that we don't often get represented in the energy poverty sphere. And indeed, the session is continuing in that field, because we are going to hear now from Daan Creupelandt. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I'm often a victim of mispronunciation of surnames myself. So Daan comes from the REScoop network, which represents over 1,500 citizen energy cooperatives. And he has over 10 years of experience with a variety of EU projects, including Interreg and H2020. He has founded a network of cooperatives that provides financing solutions, and also another one called the Mobility Factory that operates a cooperative e-car sharing platform. So, Daan, the floor is yours.
Wonderful, and thanks a lot for the introduction and for giving us the chance to share the examples, because that's what I'm intending to do. I'm not just going to show you what REScoop is, but I'm also going to touch upon quite an innovative model that we're trying to put in place in Belgium, in the city of Eeklo. I will share my screen. I hope you can hear me okay. I will share my screen because I made a short presentation. Let me know if that doesn't seem to work. There we go. Does that work? You can see it, right? All right. I will go into the full screen mode. Okay. First of all, some words on REScoop EU. REScoop EU is a network that used to be a European project, just like ASIS. We started as a European project, but eventually back in 2013, we decided to set up a European association, a European federation representing the voice of citizens and energy cooperatives in Europe. So REScoop EU was founded in 2013 officially. We only had our first employee in 2015, but right now we manage, or we try to manage, a network of about 1,500 energy cooperatives operating across Europe. And when I'm saying operating across Europe, I basically mean, well, most of our members are based in Northwestern European countries, and there's lots of reasons for that, which I won't be going too much in detail on it right now. But there's a growing network, and today our network represents about 1 million European citizens. A few years ago, we also published a study where we tried to identify the potential of European presumership. And it turns out that by 2050, half of the European population, and then we're talking 264 million European citizens, could become a presumer and produce renewables either on their own roof or by joining a collective initiative like an energy cooperative. REScoop EU as a network aims to represent the voice of citizens and cooperatives in the policy debates, and we actually found out that nobody was really representing the voice of citizens in those energy debates, and therefore that was one of the main reasons why we decided to set up REScoop EU in the first place. Today, we also try to foster international collaborations between those cooperatives, and we help them to grow and prosper. And one of the other activities that we try to bring forward as a federation is promoting the business model in the energy sector. Some words on cooperatives in general and on energy cooperatives in particular, because we often see that the concept is used in a different or in a wrong way. What an energy cooperative means to us, REScoop EU, it is a group of citizens who cooperate on energy transition projects. And energy transition projects do not only include electricity, it also includes heating. We have a growing number of members who are dealing with district heating at the moment. And as was also said in the introduction, a growing number of members in REScoop EU are also looking into transportation. Right now, we are managing a network of cooperatives who are dealing with electric car sharing. And therefore, we set up a car sharing platform which allows cooperatives to share cars, electric cars in their communities. So it's not only electricity, it also includes heating and transportation. Another misconception about energy cooperatives is that many people think that it's a technical concept. A lot of people think that a cooperative is a microgrid or what they call an energy island. And the truth is that it can be an energy island and it can be a technical concept, but not all our members are what we call microgrids. And so most of our members are involved in renewable energy production activities. But because support schemes for renewables have gone down all over Europe in the last couple of years, we've also seen that a lot of members have reorganized themselves and tried to come up with a new set of activities. And today, when we look at our network, we have cooperatives that are producing renewables. We have cooperatives that are supplying that energy back to their members. We have cooperatives dealing with storage, with monitoring services, with demand response. We have cooperatives that are setting up collective purchasing schemes, that are engaging in peer-to-peer trading, collective self-consumption. So there's a whole range of activities that these cooperatives are bringing forward, and it isn't only restricted to electricity, it also includes heating and transportation. Another misconception is that a lot of people think that a cooperative is a specific legal form. And the truth is that it can be a specific legal form. In some countries, there is a cooperative legal form existing, but in some countries, in some European member states, we don't have that legal form. For instance, in Denmark, there's no such thing as a cooperative legal form. So that means a cooperative can't be defined simply by the legal form that the organization holds. It's also not just a way of financing energy transition projects. We often get confused by crowdfunding schemes, and the truth is it can be a crowdfunding scheme, but for a cooperative, it actually goes a lot further. It means taking control over decentralized energy projects. It means giving back the power to people. It means democratizing our energy system. So it's more than just a financial investment. It means being part of the energy transition and disclosing the profits to everyone. And how a cooperative distinguishes itself from any other business is the fact that they organize themselves around 7 principles. It's 7 principles that we refer to as the ICA principles because they have been outlined by the International Cooperative Alliance. And that's also why we say cooperative is not a technical concept, it's a social concept, because open and voluntary membership, for instance, is quite crucial in a cooperative. It means everybody is eligible to participate. You can't be excluded because anyone should be able to join the cooperative. There's democratic control by members, meaning that regardless of the amount of shares that you own, you only get 1 vote at the AGM. So they are democratically controlled by the people who made an investment in the cooperative. There's an economic participation by members, meaning that people have to buy a share, which we'll get to when I'm explaining the example later on. So there's an economic transaction between the cooperative and its members. There's autonomy and independence, which is quite crucial because there's a growing number of private companies aiming to set up a cooperative, but that's not really a cooperative because then you lose your autonomy. There's also a growing, cooperatives should invest in education and training. We also try to establish cooperation amongst cooperatives, and cooperatives have a clear concern for community. And especially the last point means that a cooperative is a social concept, and therefore it also touches upon the main topic of today, which is energy poverty. And I will try to explain how a cooperative can work. I'm briefly touching upon an example that I know quite well because I used to work for EcoPower. EcoPower is a cooperative which is owned by 60,000 people living in Flanders in Belgium. So it's the Dutch-speaking region of Belgium. So the way the model works, and I'm starting on the left-hand side, you see a person who makes an investment into a cooperative. In this case, it's EcoPower. And in a cooperative, the initial investment, buying 1 share, usually costs between 100 and 500 euro. In EcoPower, it's 250 euro, but I think within our network, on average, it's somewhere in between 100 and 500 euro that you will pay for a share. Therefore, you become a co-owner of the cooperative and of the installations of the wind turbines that the cooperative is operating. And at the end of the year, you also share in the profits. You get a dividend at the end of the year, which is restricted to 6%. But EcoPower also has a supplying license, and that means we can close the loop. You do not only benefit financially, you can also purchase the electricity at an affordable rate. And when we made when we make an analysis in Belgium, we found out that for most of the people living in Flanders, in the Flemish region, EcoPower is by far the cheapest energy supplier. The main reason is because EcoPower does not consider the supplying activity as something on which they have to make a profit. It's a self-covering service. It's something that EcoPower does not wish to make a profit on, and therefore they don't charge high fees. An argument that we often hear is that cooperatives are typically something for people who have sufficient financial means and who can actually invest and buy a share into the cooperative. And this is also, I mean, to a certain extent that it's true. It also means that people who can't afford purchasing a share are not eligible to join and therefore won't be benefiting from the fair price or the low price. So this got us thinking. And in fact, what we did is we started thinking of a new business model. And in Eeklo, which is a city of about 30,000 people in Flanders, EcoPower is currently erecting a large wind turbine, which will be owned by 3 entities. It will be owned by the cooperative EcoPower. It will be co-owned by Volterra, which is another local cooperative and therefore democratically controlled by the members. And the wind turbine will also be owned by the city. So in fact, the wind turbine will be jointly owned by the 2 cooperatives and the city. And so what we're doing in ECLO is we ask the city to transform the share that they own in the wind turbine, so 1/3 is owned by the city, to transform the share that is owned by the city into what we call social shares. And those social shares are then distributed to people facing energy poverty. So that means people who can't afford purchasing a share in the cooperative can still benefit from the cheap rate because they can join the local project and they don't have to pay for the share themselves because it's already paid for by the city. That also means that people share in the profits at the end of the year, and it fosters social acceptance for the renewable energy projects within their own community. And I think finally, another thing that can't be underestimated is the fact that we finally give these people back a voice. They get a vote at the AGM. They feel part of the community again, because I think a lot of people had the feeling that they got lost somewhere. So I think this is a new model. And I think that what we now see in the new clean energy package with provisions for energy communities and for citizens, and especially for citizens and local authorities to team up and to think of new models, we can try to set up energy communities that can also help alleviate energy poverty. I will leave it there. If you have any questions, I think Stefan will moderate at the end of the session, and otherwise you can also get in touch with us or visit our website. Thanks a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for indeed giving us an overview of a subject that many of us in the field aren't entirely familiar with, how powerfully cooperatives can work to address energy poverty and what some of the challenges are, and indeed how cooperatives work. It was fascinating to hear that. 2 reminders before I go on to the next speaker. So first of all, if you have questions, please use the Q&A box. So it's at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat function. That will enable us to gather questions because indeed we expect quite a few to arrive and we won't have much time for them to be asked and answered. So there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions, please use that one. The other thing just I wanted to mention is as the conference has moved on, as the session has moved on, our number of participants has increased. So together with the panelists, we have 127 now, which indeed testifies to how much attention this is attracting, and indeed how many people are being engaged in this subject, even in such difficult circumstances as we are today with the pandemic and with other challenges that everyone faces. So thank you for staying with us throughout the session. I don't want to take more time from the last speaker, last but not least, I might add, and indeed a speaker that brings a new dimension once more to the energy poverty debate, because we don't often hear about the issue of homeless and energy poverty. So Clotilde Clark-Foulquier, she's the project manager for FEANTSA, which is the European Federation of National Organizations working with the homeless, and coordinates a housing solutions platform, which is a partnership between FEANTSA and the Fondation Abbé Pierre, which is also very active in energy poverty, and as well as Housing Europe, another partner in the field, which we've heard for a long time in this field, being active in energy poverty. She provides the platform identifies and promotes and debates innovative solutions for affordable housing in Europe. And indeed, I should add that she has more than 12 years experience in project management and EU policy work, and an MA in International Law, BA in Law, and BA in Public Administration. Very impressive there. So, Clotilde, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for this opportunity to share FEANTSA's work on energy poverty. Can you see my screen and my presentation? Yes. So, indeed, as you say, why is a homelessness organization working on energy poverty? So FEANTSA is the European Federation of National Organizations working with the homeless. And in the framework of work on homelessness, we have developed a work on housing and housing solutions. This had led us to work on adequate housing. And as you said, we worked with the Fondation Abbé Pierre and Housing Europe on housing solutions to homelessness. So in this framework, we started to work on energy poverty, particularly last year with the Fondation Abbé Pierre. We prepared this report, what are the foundation for a green and social pact, a green and social deal for Europe. And this was an overview of the European framework and national tools for combating energy poverty. So my presentation is more about policies and about projects. This was not an exhaustive report. It was a snapshot of what are some of the existing mechanisms to address energy poverty and what works, what doesn't work. So I will just present you some of our findings regarding this report last year, and also what we have identified as some of the forthcoming challenges to tackling energy poverty in the framework of the Green Deal. So in terms of findings, when you look at the policy mechanism to address energy poverty in Europe, they are basically divided in two main streams. One is the immediate mechanism to support households in energy poverty, and the other one is a long-term mechanism to change, for instance, housing conditions or the heating systems. So what we have found when we looked at those is that there is a real diversity of national instruments to support people in situation of poverty. They work, but what we have found is that it is really necessary for them to be part of a broader social inclusion strategy, and that if they are isolated, of course, it doesn't work. So some of those mechanisms in terms of immediate release for households in energy poverty, some are, for instance, energy poverty subsidies. So in Poland, in some region of Poland, during the winter, there is a wood allocation so that people can buy wood and coal. Some other mechanism that you can find in many countries in Europe look more at prevention from disconnections, for instance, or a social tariff. In Spain, for instance, there is the bono social, and according to some eligibility criteria, you can have a reduction on your electricity tariff going up to 40% reduction. So that's for some of the shorter term mechanisms. In terms of accompanying a long-term change, there are grants, low interest loans, or even zero interest loans, third-party financing that was mentioned earlier by Mrs. Vivarelli, or tax returns. If you're interested by the detail of those mechanisms, I would invite you to look at the report because they are often quite technical. So those are for, yes, the big challenge for those mechanisms, whatever they are, is that they need to be accessible. What we find in every country is that often, unfortunately, those mechanisms don't really succeed to reach out to the most excluded. It's often due to a lack of information, so that's why the project assist is so important, but it's also linked to the complexity of the process and the bureaucracy in general. And even if they can reach out to people, then too often those mechanisms are not adequate, they are not sufficient. So what we advocate for is an integrated approach based on prevention, immediate support, and long-term change. This leads us to what is it that we can do now. So we have been particularly interested by the work of Professor Jörg Vorstadt, who has looked at what are the synergies, the best policies that both respond to climate change needs and social needs. For instance, if you have a policy of increasing energy prices, this will have a good impact in terms of climate change mitigation, but very bad social impact. And so she has compared many of those policies, and what she says is that the best policies in terms of synergy between social objective and climate objective is actually renovation. Of course, there are risks attached, such as lock-in effects. So if you want to go for a quick win in renovation, then it's just a superficial renovation, and the retrofit is not carried out to its best. So then it will be much harder to really completely alleviate energy poverty. Another risk is the rebound effect, where the money saved on the energy bill will be actually spent on other kind of energy consumption. But at FEANTSA, one of the key risks we see in those renovation projects is that they are often based on the idea of a return on investment. So with the saving I have on my energy bill, I can pay back the building work or renovation work. But the problem for really low-income households and vulnerable groups is that sometimes they live in cold homes, so they don't heat at all. So there will not be any return on investment for those households. So that's why the renovation wave and renovation program must be thought through as well to target the most vulnerable households. This leads me to a second important risk linked to renovation. It's a renovation risk. So that is to say, there's been some work that has been able to demonstrate that some major renovation schemes have actually contributed to gentrification and urban segregation. So that's why we argue that massive renovation wave, renovation scheme is needed, but it really must go hand in hand with a legislative and financial frameworks that will support lowest income groups. So what does it mean? How can the Green Deal and particularly the renovation wave be truly social? Well, we do believe the European Union has a key role to play as a driver for this renovation wave and for a movement that will both aim at climate change mitigation and addressing energy poverty, but it must be based on a regulatory framework that will prevent increase in property price, for instance, increase in rent level after renovation works. Of course, as was mentioned as well earlier, the EU has set up a framework to ask member states to address energy poverty. But too often, these mechanisms, as I said earlier, are not accessible or are inadequate. So more work must be done in that front. Last but not least, we must ensure that the European legal framework doesn't prevent addressing poverty fuel. And when I say that, I speak particularly of social tariff that can sometimes be seen as going against competition law. To finish, so we argue that it's necessary to aim for large-scale investment in renovation for energy efficiency, but this must be shaped, as I said, particularly to support lower income groups and vulnerable groups. So the funding for renovation must be made to address those specific groups. And for instance, we have identified in our report that one of the biggest challenges is the renovation of multi-apartment buildings, because the renovation of the building by itself doesn't add values to, or very little value to the individual apartments. So this is a problematic in many countries in Europe, particularly in Eastern Europe, but I know as well in France it is quite an important challenge. So member states must develop incentive programs, particularly aiming to poor households through, for instance, zero interest loan or grants. And the energy standards performance must be applied not just to construction, but to the rental market. But this, of course, can only be done if support can be provided to individual homeowners and poor owners in this transition. So I hope it's clear. I'm sorry if it was a bit quick. You can find our report on energy poverty on FEANTSA website and on the Housing Solutions platform website. You can log in on our website to look more at the work we do on the Just Transition Fund and the renovation wave at the moment. And feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to tell you more about what we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clotilde. Thank you for keeping to time, and thank you for being so informative in such a concise and helpful way. We are rather limited for time. We only have 7 minutes, unfortunately, for questions. So I will ask now the presenters to reflect on the questions we have. There's a question specifically for Silvia, and these are health questions which are interesting, whether there are public health data that you mentioned around excess deaths and so on. there is a question for all of the project around whether ASSIST, but also the others from William Baker, whether you are monitoring health and well-being impacts, but also what do you think the impacts of COVID-19 will be on energy poverty? I know this is a big one, so but maybe very briefly. There is also a question around data from Joy Clancy, which I think is interesting around diversity of vulnerable customers beyond the sex of the household head. Indeed, gender and energy poverty has emerged as a very important and pressing issue in recent years. Another question there is specifically for Daan around Belgian utilities, but maybe Daan, you can answer. I see you answered it in the Q&A, so maybe you can answer that specific question in the Q&A. We have 5 or 6 minutes, so please be brief so we get the benefit of your opinions in this final closing part of the session. Thanks. Silvia, if you can unmute yourself.
Yes, I was about, I think it's more effective if I just type, but just one question. If I type, all people can see what I type because I would like everybody to
yes,
see
I
my
think
reply.
you,
yeah, because
yes.
I mean, what I'm going to say is that some of the results of our project, of course, are all public. And we have reports, and I just wanted to send to all the attendees the link to the website of the Combi project, because there are reports where really they all the assumptions, calculation, what they have done is made available for everybody. So I just send you the link of the project, and then you will have all the information available there. Thank you.
Thanks. Right. Any thoughts on health, well-being impacts and COVID-19, and also gender?
I can quickly go on the COVID-19. All our members were very quick to react on that, also to put together what was happening in their national countries, but also to advocate with the energy providers, regulators, to ban disconnections for all consumers. Also create social tariffs for the ones in need, and delay the payment of bills and not have an interest on that. And in many of the countries that was approved as a support network for the consumers in general, not only energy poverty. And as for the gender, when doing a study in our survey last summer, we showed that the impact was pretty similar. I think the difference was like 45 to 55. There was not a significant impact, because we're also very curious to see if that would make a difference.
One challenge with gender is that data is not disaggregated, so we can actually see those impacts. And indeed, that's what Joy Clancy has noticed. We only know if a household is headed by, you know, it's a female or male head of the household. That's the only data we have. So anyway, any further comments from the panel? 4 minutes.
Yeah, I will just add something. On the ASSIST, we didn't actually monitor the health impact, which is a pity, and I know there's a lot of work going on, and Stefan is also doing work on that. What we did monitor was 2 things. One, of course, is the energy consumption, but that was not our main focus. What we were aiming is to check whether the impact of having someone to assist you had an impact on the vulnerability. What we sort of defined is a vulnerability empowerment factor, and we realized that as Neil was saying yesterday, he's a member of the UK Steering Committee, providing social support to consumers in need is already a help for them. So we had two indicators, the ESI, which is the energy saving, which includes also the increase of the quality of life, and the vulnerability empowerment factor. Nothing on gender.
Any other thoughts or comments?
For the health and well-being, we're gonna run questionnaires in parallel with our energy savings questionnaires, so to see if the savings on energy are going to impact both the physical health and the mental health. But we don't have, the results are upcoming, and we're also very curious to see what that is going to lead to.
I should say that indeed for the Step In project, I'll write the address in the chat, hopefully everyone can see it. We are now collecting data for the 3 living lab locations or on the specific health and well-being impacts of COVID-19 as they develop, which has proven quite a challenging task, given that things are happening very, very fast, and it's very difficult to reach vulnerable consumers in these circumstances. I don't know if there's any more open questions that people, oh, there's one more, which is, do you think there's a possible measure to alleviate energy poverty? Member states should adopt a legal framework to oblige owners to rent their houses to do energy refurbishments. I think there are some countries that do it. I don't know if people want to just say one more quick response to this before we close the session.
Very quickly, maybe, I forgot to say that FEANTSA is a member of the Right to Energy Coalition that advocates for the ban on disconnection. Is a coalition of environmental and social NGO. And to respond to the last question, there are mandatory standards of energy performance, for instance, in the UK. But I just want to underline maybe the Dutch example, because it's the fruit of a national coalition that brought together more than 100 organizations, and together they agreed on what standards of energy performance to reach, especially social housing providers committed to reach those standards. So I think it's a very interesting example of mandatory energy efficiency.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you, Clotilde. We have come up to the hour now. It's 12, it's noon in Central European time. So thank you all for this amazing session. It's just been so enlightening and so helpful to see all these insights, to find out what's been happening. Thank you to the audience for being so engaged, for posing some really interesting questions. And I'm sure the coordinators will be in touch afterwards with recordings, dates, all the information on this session will be available afterwards as well for everyone who has missed it fully or in part. And thank you once again. Marina, I'm just going to pass the floor on to you once again if you want to close the session.
Stefan, I want to thank you for chairing the session. I want to thank all the speakers for contributing to the success of the session, and I want to thank all the participants for joining us and for bearing with us for the last hour and a half online, which is not always easy. So yes, indeed, thanks to all. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you again tomorrow at 10:30 for the last webinar on the policy issues, where we will be presenting our policy framework paper with the recommendations for future policies on energy poverty. Thank you again, and see you all tomorrow, same channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.